The massive holographic display in the Galactic Council chamber showed Earth spinning slowly, a blue and green marble that looked almost fragile compared to the armored war worlds of the other species. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembly of alien delegates, her human frame dwarfed by the towering forms of the Craxian warriors and the crystalline bodies of the Zelathi commanders. "The humans refuse our demand for tribute," announced Overlord Thax, his forearms crossed over his chitinous chest. The Craxians' mandibles clicked in what Chen had learned was their equivalent of laughter. "They claim they need more time to consider our generous offer of vassalage." The chamber erupted in various forms of alien amusement. The Zelathi chimed like breaking glass, while the serpentine voidlings hissed their mirth through forked tongues. Chen remained silent, her face carefully neutral as she watched the display. "More time," mocked Commander Zek of the Zelathi. "The humans always need more time. When the Proxima colonies were threatened, they asked for time. When the mining rights to the asteroid belt were challenged, they asked for time. Now, faced with the might of the entire galactic empire, they ask for time again." Chen finally spoke, her voice calm despite the churning in her stomach. "Earth's government simply wishes to ensure that any agreement we enter is in the best interests of both our peoples." "Your people?" Thax leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow over the human ambassador. "Your people are farmers and merchants, playing with primitive nuclear weapons while we command fleets that can crack planets. Your military is a joke. Your soldiers flee at the first sign of real combat. The galaxy knows what you are, humans, cowards." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. Chen felt the weight of it, the way it seemed to press down on her shoulders. She had heard it before, of course, ever since humanity had made first contact 50 years ago. They had been labeled as the weaklings of the galaxy, the species that talked instead of fought, the ones who always sought diplomatic solutions. "We prefer the term cautious," Chen said quietly. "Cautious," Thax repeated, and the clicking of his mandibles grew louder. "Is that what you called it when the hegemony tested your borders? When 3 of their scout ships entered your space, and your mighty Earth fleet did nothing but send strongly worded messages?" Chen remembered that incident. The images of the hegemony ships hovering near Titan base. Weapons powered, but not firing. The Earth Defense Force had scrambled fighters, but they had held back. Waiting, always waiting. The hegemony had eventually left, but not before broadcasting to the entire galaxy that human space was undefended. "We avoided bloodshed," Chen said. "You avoided honor," Zek interjected, his crystalline form pulsing with light. "Every species in this council has proven themselves in battle. The Craxians conquered the spiral arm through strength. We Zelathi claimed our territories through strategic brilliance. Even the voidlings, peaceful as they are now, earned their place through the 1,000-year war. But humans? Humans talk. Humans negotiate. Humans run." The assembly murmured agreement. Chen could feel their contempt like radiation, washing over her in waves. She thought of the reports from Earth, the growing panic, as more and more species joined the Galactic Empire's demand for humanity's submission. The protests in the streets, the fear in children's eyes as they watched news feeds of alien warships massing at the border. "The Empire's terms are simple," Thax continued, addressing the assembly more than Chen now. "Earth pays tribute of 40% of its annual production. Human colonies submit to imperial oversight. Your military, such as it is, disbands and integrates into our auxiliary forces. In exchange, you receive our protection." "Protection from whom?" Chen asked. "From yourselves, mostly," Thax said, and the assembly laughed again. "You clearly cannot protect your own interests. Better to accept your place as a lesser species and benefit from our guidance." Chen's hand moved unconsciously to the small communicator in her pocket. The emergency beacon that would signal Earth that negotiations had failed. She had hoped it wouldn't come to this. For 50 years, humanity had walked the knife's edge of galactic politics, always one step away from war, always backing down when pushed. "I will need to convey your terms to my government," Chen said. "Of course you will," Thax said. More time. Always more time. But our patience is not infinite. Ambassador. The Empire has been more than generous. We have given you chances that warrior species would never receive. Because we pity you. That word hurt more than coward. Pity. Chen saw it in their alien eyes. The way they looked at humans like some might look at a wounded animal, something weak and pathetic, barely worth the effort of conquering. You have 7 of your Earth days, Zek announced. Submit or face the consequences. Though I doubt your species has the stomach for what resistance would mean, the session dissolved. Delegates filing out in groups. Their various forms of communication, creating a cacophony of sound. Chen stood alone for a moment, staring at the hologram of Earth. So small, so fragile. Her communicator buzzed. A message from Earth, encrypted and urgent. She opened it with trembling fingers. Operation Prometheus approved. The Boogeymen are waking up. Chen closed her eyes, feeling a chill run down her spine. The galaxy thought humans were cowards because they had only seen one face of humanity. The diplomat. The negotiator. The one who always sought peace. They had never seen what Earth kept hidden in the shadows. What every human government for the past 50 years had agreed must never be unleashed unless there was no other choice. She thought of the old stories her grandfather had told her. Stories from before first contact, when humans only had themselves to fight. Stories of warriors who moved like ghosts, who could appear anywhere, strike without warning, and vanish before anyone knew what had happened. Stories of the ones they called Boogeymen, because they were the monsters that even monsters feared. The Galactic Empire wanted to see humanity's true face. They were about to get their wish. As Chen left the council chamber, she passed a group of Craxian warriors. They chittered at her in amusement, making exaggerated cowering gestures. She kept walking, her face calm, but inside she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not anger, something older and more primal. She almost felt sorry for them. 3 days passed in tense silence. The Galactic Empire's fleet continued to mass at the border. A show of force meant to cow humanity into submission. News feeds across human space showed the massive dreadnoughts, each one the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could turn planets to ash. On Earth, the protests had stopped. The streets were quiet. Too quiet, some said. Like the calm before a storm. In her quarters aboard the diplomatic station, Chen received updates from home. They came in code, hidden in routine diplomatic traffic. The Boogeymen were moving. Assets were being positioned. Old protocols were being dusted off and activated. She thought of the records she had seen once, in a secure facility deep beneath Geneva. Files from before first contact, when humanity's greatest enemy had been itself. The things those warriors had done in the name of protecting their nations, the lengths they had gone to, the lines they had crossed. Humanity had made a choice when they reached the stars. They had locked away that part of themselves, presented a peaceful face to the galaxy. Better to be thought cowards than to show what humans were truly capable of when cornered. But now they were cornered. On the 4th day, something changed. The first reports came from the hegemony border worlds, confused and fragmented. Patrol ships were disappearing. Not destroyed, not engaged in battle, simply gone. There one moment, vanished the next. The hegemony blamed technical failures at first. Space was vast and dangerous. After all, ships were lost all the time. But as the disappearances mounted, panic began to spread. Entire squadrons would patrol a sector and find nothing, only to return and discover their base station had been boarded and stripped of all data while they were gone. Then came the ghost signals. Broadcasts on hegemony military channels, using perfect encryption, giving orders that sent ships to empty coordinates or had them firing on their own allies. The hegemony's vaunted communication network, the backbone of their military might, began to turn against them. Chen watched the reports with grim satisfaction. The Boogeymen were artists, and war was their canvas. They didn't fight the way other species did, with massive fleets and overwhelming firepower. They fought the way humans had learned to fight in the dark corners of Earth, where information was ammunition, and fear was the greatest weapon of all. On the fifth day, the Craxian Empire reported similar problems. Their border fortresses, supposedly impregnable, began suffering system failures. Life support would cut out for just long enough to force evacuations. Weapons systems would target empty space, while real threats slipped past unnoticed. And always, there were the whispers among the troops. Stories of shadows that moved on their own. Of Craxian warriors found unconscious with no memory of what had happened. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Chen attended, watching as Overlord Thax raged about human treachery. "They dare attack us while talking of peace," he roared. "This is why humans are not just cowards but deceivers. They strike from the shadows like vermin." "We have attacked no one," Chen said calmly. "We have no knowledge of these incidents you describe." It was technically true. Earth's government had no official knowledge of Operation Prometheus. The Boogeymen operated outside the normal chain of command, answerable only to protocols written in blood decades ago. Plausible deniability was just another weapon in their arsenal. Lies. Zek's crystalline form blazed with anger. Who else could be doing this? "The timing is too convenient." "Perhaps," Chen said slowly. "These are simply the consequences of maintaining such large military forces. Complex systems fail. Soldiers see threats where none exist. Fear can make even the strongest warriors act irrationally." She saw the doubt creep into their alien eyes. Because that was the other thing about the Boogeymen. They left no trace. No bodies. No evidence. Nothing but chaos and confusion in their wake. How could the Empire prove humans were responsible when they couldn't even prove anything had happened at all? On the sixth day, the real fear began. It started small. High-ranking military officials across multiple species began receiving messages, personal messages, on their most secure channels, containing information that should have been impossible for anyone to know. Details about their families, their personal habits, their secret fears. The messages all said the same thing. The humans are no longer asking for time. Then came the demonstrations. A Craxian fleet admiral woke to find his command codes had been changed while he slept. A Zealothi strategic planning facility discovered their entire defensive grid had been reprogrammed to play human music instead of targeting data. The Voidling Intelligence Network, considered the best in the galaxy, found their databases filled with something called cat videos. None of it was lethal. None of it even caused permanent damage. But the message was clear. If humans could do this, what else could they do? The Boogeymen were showing their hand. Just a glimpse of it. Like a predator letting prey see its eyes in the darkness. Letting them know they were being hunted. Chen received another coded message. Phase 1 complete. Awaiting authorization for Phase 2. She deleted the message and prepared for the final day. The seventh day dawned with the Galactic Empire in disarray. Not defeated, not even significantly damaged, but something worse. They were afraid. The mighty warriors who had conquered half the galaxy were jumping at shadows, seeing human agents in every malfunction, every accident, every unexplained event. The final council session was very different from the first. The alien delegates entered carefully, eyeing the shadows, their weapon systems active. Despite all protocols, Thax's forearms twitched constantly, his warrior's instincts screaming danger in a room that should have been secure. "Your answer," he demanded without preamble. "Will humanity submit?" Chen stood slowly, feeling the weight of history on her shoulders. 50 years of peace. 50 years of being called cowards. 50 years of holding back the monsters that humanity had created and then caged. "No," she said simply. The word fell into silence. Even through their fear, the aliens seemed shocked. The cowardly humans were refusing? "Then you choose war," Thax said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We choose to defend ourselves," Chen corrected. "But before you commit to this course, perhaps you should know something about human history." about why we tried so hard to be diplomats instead of warriors. She activated her personal display, showing images from Earth's past. Wars that had scarred continents. Weapons that had poisoned land for generations. And always, in the shadows, the ones who fought the silent wars. You called us cowards, Chen continued. But cowardice and restraint are not the same thing. We chose to lock away parts of ourselves when we reached the stars. The parts that had made us very, very good at war, because we knew what we were capable of. The images shifted. Grainy footage from operations long classified. Soldiers who could infiltrate any facility, eliminate any target, disappear without a trace. The ones who had written the book on asymmetric warfare, who had turned fear itself into a weapon. You've had a taste, Chen said. 7 days of what a handful of our specialists can do when ordered to show restraint. But understand this. What you've experienced is nothing compared to what awaits if you proceed, because once we unleash them fully, once we give them permission to do what they were trained to do, there will be no going back. Threats from a coward species mean nothing, Thax said, but his mandibles clicked nervously. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. You want to know why Earth's military never engaged when provoked? Why we always backed down? It wasn't fear. It was mercy, because we knew that once we started fighting, we might not be able to stop. She paused, letting that sink in. The galaxy has seen humans as diplomats, as negotiators, as cowards. You've never seen us as warriors because we chose not to show you. But make no mistake, we are the species that split the atom before we reached our own moon. We are the ones who turned warfare into science and murder into art. We are the ones who created warriors so effective, so terrifying, that we had to chain them with laws and protocols just to sleep at night. The council chamber was utterly silent now. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet, Chen said. After that, the restraints come off. And you'll learn why humanity's greatest act of courage was choosing to be seen as cowards rather than showing the galaxy what we really are. She turned and walked out, leaving the alien delegates in stunned silence. Behind her, she could hear the frantic communication starting, the debates and arguments. But she knew what they would decide. The Boogeymen had done their job too well. They had planted the seed of doubt, of fear. The Galactic Empire thought they were calling humanity's bluff. They were about to learn that it had never been a bluff at all. As Chen reached her quarters, her communicator buzzed one last time. A simple message. Phase 2. Authorized. The Boogeymen are coming home. She sat down heavily, pouring herself a drink with hands that barely trembled. Humanity had tried so hard to be better than their nature, to rise above the violence that had defined their species for millennia, but perhaps that had been the mistake. Perhaps the only way to have peace among the stars was to remind everyone why Earth's children had once been the monsters in their own stories. The hour passed quickly. Chen watched from her window as the massive forms of the Empire's fleet began to shift, engines powering up. For a moment, she dared to hope they were retreating. Then the first weapons fired, brilliant lances of energy streaking toward Earth's defensive lines. Chen closed her eyes and whispered a prayer for forgiveness. Not from any god, but from the future generations who would have to live with what came next. The Galactic Empire had asked to see humanity's true face. The Boogeymen were about to show them. The first Empire dreadnought to fire on Earth's defensive line was the Craxian flagship Worldbreaker. Its main cannon could shatter moons, and its shields had never been breached in 200 years of conquest. The beam of pure destruction lanced out toward the human defense platforms, and every species watching expected to see humanity's meager defenses vaporized. Instead, the beam hit empty space. The defense platform had moved. Not dramatically, not far, but just enough. The massive installation, which should have required hours to adjust its position, had somehow shifted at the last possible second. The killing blow meant to demoralize Earth's forces had missed by meters. On the bridge of the Worldbreaker, Overlord Thax stared at the tactical display in confusion. How? Thanks. His answer came in the form of alarms shrieking across the bridge. Internal security breach. Multiple hull breaches. Atmosphere venting from a dozen compartments. But the ship's sensors showed no incoming fire, no boarding craft, no explanation for the sudden chaos. Then the lights went out. In the darkness, something moved. The Craxian warriors, bred for battle, raised their weapons and fired at shadows. Their shots illuminated brief glimpses of figures in strange armor, moving with impossible speed and precision. The armor seemed to bend light around it, making the figures appear as distortions in reality rather than solid beings. When the emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, half the bridge crew was unconscious. Thax himself was pinned to his command throne by some kind of adhesive restraint he couldn't break. On every screen, a single message appeared in perfect Craxian script. You were warned. You were warned. Across the Empire's fleet, similar scenes played out. The Boogeymen had been positioned for days, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the authorization to act. They moved through the massive warships like ghosts, disabling systems, neutralizing crews, turning the Empire's greatest weapons into floating prisons. On Earth, in a bunker buried beneath Cheyenne Mountain, General Sarah Mitchell watched the tactical displays with grim satisfaction. The Boogeymen were performing exactly as advertised. Decades of advancement in stealth technology, cybernetic enhancement, and psychological warfare had created soldiers who were more myth than human. Phoenix team has neutralized the Worldbreaker, reported Colonel James Crawford, the liaison between conventional forces and the special operations units. Spectre team reports success on 3 Zalathi cruisers. Ghost team is... He paused, reading the report. Sir, Ghost team has taken control of an entire Voidling carrier group. How many operators? Mitchell asked. 6, ma'am. 6 humans had captured 12 warships crewed by thousands. Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy had no idea what they were dealing with. The Boogeymen weren't just soldiers. They were the culmination of humanity's darkest military programs, enhanced with cybernetics that pushed the limits of what was considered human, trained from childhood in facilities that didn't officially exist, armed with weapons that bent the laws of physics and armor that made them living shadows. But their greatest weapon was fear. Commander Zek of the Zalathi watched in horror as his tactical net showed ship after ship going dark. Not destroyed, but worse. Taken. The pride of the Galactic Empire's fleet was being dismantled from within by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't fight, couldn't even understand. Order all ships to activate internal defense protocols, he commanded, his crystalline form pulsing with agitation. Sir, his operations officer replied, fear evident even through the translator. The protocols are activating on their own, but they're targeting our own personnel. Abadi. It was true. Across the fleet, automated systems were turning on their creators. Security doors sealed randomly, trapping crew members. Life support fluctuated wildly. Weapons systems identified friendly targets as hostile. The Boogeymen hadn't just infiltrated the ships. They had turned the vessels themselves into weapons against their crews. On the Voidling carrier, Eternal Night, Captain Slith coiled his serpentine form tighter as another section of his ship went dark. The Voidlings prided themselves on their intelligence gathering, their ability to see through any deception. But the humans attacking his ship were like trying to grasp smoke. Captain, his security chief hissed, we have visual confirmation of boarders in Section 7. Show me, Slith ordered. The screen flickered to life, showing a corridor in the depths of the ship. For a moment, there was nothing but shadows. Then, the shadows moved, and Slith realized with growing horror that the darkness itself had taken form. Figures in armor that seemed to absorb light moved with purposeful efficiency, placing devices on critical systems before vanishing again. Can we stop them? Sir. By the time our teams arrive, they're already gone. They seem to know our patrol patterns, our security codes, everything. It's like they've been studying us for years. They had been. Every diplomatic meeting, every cultural exchange, Every moment of peaceful interaction had been an intelligence-gathering operation. Humans had smiled and talked and negotiated while memorizing every weakness, every vulnerability, every fear of the species they might one day have to fight. Back on Earth, the real shock was about to begin. "Ma'am," Crawford reported, "Phase 3 is ready to initiate." Mitchell nodded. Phase 1 had been the warning. Phase 2 was the paralysis of the enemy fleet. Phase 3 was the demonstration of why humanity had hidden its true military capabilities for so long. Execute. In hidden bases across the solar system, weapons platforms that had been disguised as mining stations and research facilities revealed their true nature. The galaxy had always wondered why humanity had so many scientific installations. They were about to find out. The first surprise came from the asteroid belt. What the Empire had dismissed as a scattered collection of mining colonies suddenly bristled with weapons, not the energy beams and plasma cannons favored by most species, but something far more primitive and far more terrifying: kinetic weapons. Mass drivers. Rail guns that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of the speed of light. The Galactic Empire had shields designed to stop energy weapons, deflect plasma, dissipate exotic particles. They had never considered that humans would use something as simple as throwing rocks very, very fast. The first volley from the asteroid belt installations hit 17 Empire ships simultaneously. Shields designed for energy weapons offered little protection against simple tungsten rods moving at relativistic speeds. The projectiles punched through hulls like tissue paper, their kinetic energy converting to heat and plasma inside the ships. But that was just the beginning. From Mars, humanity's second weapon revealed itself. The red planet's surface split open in a dozen places, revealing massive installations. The Empire's analysts had seconds to wonder what they were before finding out. Gravity weapons. Humanity had cracked the code of artificial gravity generation decades ago, but had hidden it, pretending to still use rotation for shipboard gravity. Now they turned that technology into a weapon. Invisible waves of distorted space-time rippled out from Mars, catching Empire ships in fields that crushed them like tin cans, or tore them apart at the molecular level. On Luna, Earth's moon showed its own surprises. The crater installations the Empire had marked as observatories were actually massive electromagnetic pulse generators. Waves of EMP washed over the Empire fleet, frying systems that hadn't been hardened against such primitive attacks because no civilized species used them anymore. But humanity's true horror was yet to come. From Earth itself, hidden in the deepest oceans and buried beneath mountain ranges, humanity's last resort weapons activated. The Empire had wondered why Earth still had so many nuclear weapons when they had achieved fusion power. They assumed it was primitive backward thinking. They were wrong. The missiles that rose from Earth weren't carrying simple nuclear warheads. They carried something far worse: antimatter warheads. Each one capable of cracking a moon, singularity bombs that could create temporary black holes, nanoswarm dispensers that could reduce a ship to its component atoms in minutes. And leading them all, like shepherds guiding a flock of death, were the Boogeymen. Spectre 1, call sign Nightmare, stood on the hull of a Craxian battleship, his armor's magnetic boots keeping him anchored in the vacuum. His heads-up display showed the incoming human weapons, their trajectories perfect, their timing precise. He raised his hand, and the small device he carried sent out a signal. Every Empire ship infected by the Boogeymen's viruses suddenly lost navigation control. They couldn't dodge, couldn't flee, couldn't even surrender. They could only wait for death to arrive. But Nightmare had different orders. Not to destroy, but to demonstrate. He sent another signal, and the incoming weapons adjusted their courses slightly. Instead of direct hits, they would pass close enough to terrify but not kill. The antimatter warheads detonated in space near the Empire fleet, each explosion brighter than a sun. The gravitational weapons created distortions that made hardened warriors weep in terror. The nanoswarms formed shapes in space, spelling out messages in the languages of every Empire species. We chose mercy. Choose wisely. In the command center of the Worldbreaker, still restrained to his throne, Overlord Thax watched his invincible fleet reduced to helplessness in minutes, not destroyed, which would have been a warrior's death, but humiliated. shown that they existed only because humanity allowed it. A figure materialized in front of him, armor shifting from shadow to visibility. The boogeyman removed his helmet, revealing a scarred human face with eyes that had seen too much. "I'm Colonel Marcus Reaper Stone," the human said in perfect Craxian, "team lead for Operation Prometheus. I wanted you to see my face, Overlord, to understand that we're not myths or legends. We're soldiers, human soldiers who volunteered to become monsters so that our species could survive among the stars." "Impossible," Thax clicked. "No species could hide such power." "The resources alone. We've been preparing for this day since before we knew you existed," Stone continued. "Every human knows the stories. How we almost destroyed ourselves a dozen times. How we created weapons that could end worlds before we even left our own. We made a choice when we found we weren't alone. We could be conquerors, like you. Or we could try to be better." He gestured to the view screens showing the paralyzed Empire fleet. "We chose to be diplomats. To negotiate. To be called cowards, rather than show what we could do. Because we knew that once we started down this path, we might not be able to stop. The weapons you've seen today? They're 50 years old. Imagine what we've built since then that even I don't know about." Thax's 4 eyes focused on the human. "Why show mercy? Why not destroy us?" Stone smiled, and it was an expression full of sadness. "Because that's the point. We're trying to be better than our nature. But we needed you to understand that it's a choice. We choose peace not from weakness, but from strength. We choose diplomacy not from cowardice, but from wisdom. And we choose mercy not from inability to destroy you, but from the hope that we won't have to." He replaced his helmet, the armor immediately shifting back to its light-bending camouflage. "Your fleet will be released in 6 hours. You'll find no permanent damage. No casualties beyond bruised pride. Take that time to think about what you've learned. Humanity extends an offer of genuine alliance, not vassalage. We can be the greatest friends the galaxy has ever known. Or," he paused, letting the implications hang in the air, "or you can find out what Earth's children are capable of when we stop holding back." The figure vanished, leaving Thax alone with his thoughts and the quiet hum of his crippled ship. Across the solar system, similar conversations were taking place. Boogeymen appearing before Empire commanders, delivering the same message. Humanity didn't want to be conquerors, they wanted to be partners, but they would not be victims. As the 6-hour deadline approached, emergency sessions convened on every Empire world. The footage from the battle, if it could even be called that, spread like wildfire. Mighty warships reduced to helplessness. Weapons that defied understanding. Soldiers who moved like death itself. And through it all, the growing realization that humanity had shown them only a fraction of their true capabilities. On Earth, General Mitchell received a priority transmission from Ambassador Chen. The Galactic Council was ready to talk. Really talk this time. Not dictate terms to a species they had grossly underestimated. "Stand down the boogeymen," Chen requested. "Let them fade back into the shadows where they belong." Mitchell nodded and gave the order. Across the solar system, the special operations teams began their extraction. By the time the Empire fleet regained control of their ships, the human weapons platforms were already returning to their disguised states. The asteroid belt became just a mining operation again. Mars sealed its weapons beneath false research stations. Luna's observatories returned to watching the stars. And the boogeymen vanished like they had never existed at all. But the galaxy would not forget, could not forget. Every species in the Empire would remember the day they learned that human restraint was not weakness but strength. That human diplomacy was not cowardice, but wisdom. And that human mercy was not inability but choice. In the depths of black sites across Earth, the boogeymen returned to their hidden bases. They removed their armor, packed away their weapons, and prepared to fade back into legend. Some would return to lives as normal soldiers, their true nature known only to a select few. Others would remain in the shadows, ready for the day they might be needed again. Colonel Marcus Stone stood in the debriefing room, facing the Joint Chiefs of Earth's combined military forces. His report was simple, and direct. Mission accomplished. The Empire knows what we are now. More importantly, they know what we choose not to be. Do you think it will last? Asked Admiral Patel. This peace? Stone considered the question. They'll remember what they saw today. The weapons, the tactics, the complete helplessness they felt. But more than that, they'll remember that we could have destroyed them, and didn't. That might be enough. And if it's not? Stone's scarred face was impassive. Then, we'll remind them why humanity's greatest monsters are the ones we created ourselves, and why we keep them chained until the universe forces us to let them loose. As he left the debriefing, Stone thought about the young soldiers training in hidden facilities around the world. The next generation of Boogeymen, learning the skills that everyone hoped would never be needed. They were humanity's insurance policy, the darkness that let the light shine. The galaxy had labeled humanity cowards. They had learned the truth. Humanity wasn't fearless. They were so intimate with fear that they had made it into a weapon. They weren't peaceful because they couldn't fight. They were peaceful because they knew exactly how good at fighting they could be. And in the shadows, the Boogeymen waited. Patient. Ready. Hoping they would never be called upon again. But prepared for the day when hope wasn't enough. The Galactic Empire had wanted to see warriors. Instead, they had seen soldiers. The difference, as they had learned, was that warriors fought for glory, soldiers fought to end the fighting, and humanity's soldiers were very, very good at their jobs. Earth slept peacefully that night. Protected not by massive fleets or overwhelming firepower, but by the knowledge that their monsters were bigger than anyone else's, and that those monsters had chosen to serve rather than rule. In the morning, new diplomatic channels would open. Real alliances would be forged. The galaxy would move forward with a new understanding of the quiet species that had tried so hard to be seen as harmless. But first, the universe had to process what it had witnessed. The day the cowards showed their teeth. The day the diplomats revealed their swords. The day humanity proved that the most dangerous predator is the one that chooses not to hunt. The Boogeymen had made their point. Now it was time to see if the galaxy had learned its lesson. 6 months after the day the universe learned humanity's secret, the Galactic Council convened for what historians would later call the most important session in its 1,000-year history. The chamber that had once echoed with mockery of human cowardice now held a very different atmosphere. Ambassador Chen entered to find the alien delegates already assembled, but their postures had changed. Where once they had loomed over her with contempt, now they watched her approach with something between respect and wariness. The Craxian warriors no longer made aggressive displays. The Zealothy's crystalline forms pulsed with cautious patterns. Even the serpentine voidlings had coiled themselves more defensively. Ambassador Chen, Overlord Thax greeted her. The massive Craxian's voice carried none of its former condescension. His 4 arms were held in what she had learned was a gesture of respect among his people. We are honored by your presence. Honored. Not amused, not dismissive, but honored. Chen kept her expression neutral as she took her place at the council table, though internally she marveled at the change. 6 months ago, humanity had been the galaxy's joke. Now, they were its nightmare turned protector. The council has reviewed the proposed Treaty of Mutual Defense, Chairman Zek announced, his crystalline form shimmering with formal patterns. Chen allowed herself a small smile. The treaty represented everything humanity had wanted from the beginning. Not vassalage, but partnership. Not conquest, but cooperation. Each species would maintain their sovereignty while contributing to collective defense. Trade would flow freely. Knowledge would be shared. And most importantly, conflicts would be resolved through diplomacy first, with military action as a last resort. However, a new voice interjected. Some members have expressed concerns about humanity's special assets. Some members, the speaker was Ambassador Vrix of the Hegemony, a species that had joined the council only recently. They had been among the most aggressive in the past, quick to test borders and claim territory. Now, like all the others, they had learned caution. The beings you call Boogeymen, Vrix continued. How can we trust that they won't be used against council members? Chen had expected this question. The special operations forces you're referring to have returned to their primary role as defensive assets. They exist to protect humanity and, by extension, our allies. They are not tools of conquest or oppression, but they could be, pressed Vrix. We've all seen the recordings. Soldiers who can infiltrate any defense, weapons that defy our understanding, tactics that turn our own technology against us. How do we know you won't decide to use them to dominate the galaxy? It was Thax who answered, surprising everyone. Because they could have done so already, the Craxian rumbled. When our fleets hung helpless in Earth's skies, when their weapons could have reduced us to atoms, when their warriors had us at their mercy, they chose to let us go. Not from weakness, but from strength. He turned his 4 eyes to Vrix. I have been a warrior for 2 centuries. I have conquered worlds and broken empires. And I tell you now, I have never been more terrified than when I realized the humans we called cowards could have destroyed us at any time in the past 50 years, and chose not to. That choice, Chen added quietly, is what defines us. Yes, we created weapons that could crack worlds. Yes, we trained soldiers to be living nightmares. But we did so not to conquer, but to ensure we would never be conquered. The Boogeymen exist so that humanity can afford to be diplomatic. They are our insurance policy, nothing more. And if someone attacks humanity, asked Slith of the Voidlings, what then? Chen's expression hardened. Then they'll learn why we worked so hard to keep that part of ourselves hidden. But that's not a threat, Ambassador. It's simply a fact. Every species has the right to defend itself. We've simply been thorough in our preparations. The council chamber fell silent for a moment, each delegate remembering their own taste of human thoroughness. Ships that had been infiltrated without detection. Systems that had been turned against their creators. Weapons that had appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. There's something else, Chen continued, activating her display. Something we've debated sharing but have decided you need to know. The hologram showed Earth, but not as the Council had ever seen it. This image revealed the hidden defenses, the camouflaged installations, the true extent of human preparation. Gasps echoed through the chamber as delegates realized that what they had witnessed 6 months ago was indeed just a fraction of human capability. Every asteroid in our belt can become a kinetic weapon. Every moon and planet in our system houses defensive platforms. Our civilian ships can be converted to military use in hours. Our colonies, which you thought were defenseless, have been fortresses all along. We've been preparing for invasion since before we knew you existed. Why show us this? Zek asked, his form pulsing with agitation. Because secrets breed suspicion, Chen replied. And suspicion breeds conflict. We're choosing trust. We're showing you what we are, truly are, so that you understand. Humanity didn't become diplomatic because we were weak. We became diplomatic because we knew how strong we could be, and we wanted to be better than that. She paused, letting her words sink in. The treaty we're proposing isn't just about military alliance. It's about choosing a different path. Instead of empires built on conquest, we build a community built on cooperation. Instead of might making right, we let right guide might. And yes, we keep our weapons sharp and our soldiers ready. Because the universe is dangerous. But we point them outward, at the threats we'll face together, not at each other. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Even Vrix, despite their concerns, couldn't argue with the logic. Better to have humanity as an ally than an enemy. Better to benefit from their protection than face their wrath. But the real changes came after the treaty was signed. The first indication was in the trade networks. Human technology, previously restricted, began flowing to allied worlds. Not weapons, but innovations that had been hidden. Medical techniques that could cure diseases thought incurable. Agricultural methods that could feed billions. energy systems that made scarcity obsolete. We've been holding back more than just our military, Doctor. Lisa Park explained to a gathering of alien scientists on the new United Research Station orbiting Jupiter. Every advancement that could be weaponized, we kept to ourselves. But now, as allies, we can share the benefits while managing the risks together. The Zalathi scientist studying the human data on gravity manipulation was stunned. This could revolutionize space travel. Why didn't you share this before? Odin. Because the same technology that can fold space for a ship can tear it apart for a weapon, Park replied. We needed to know you wouldn't use it to destroy each other. Or us. Meanwhile, the military integration proceeded carefully. Human advisors were assigned to Allied fleets, teaching them about asymmetric warfare, electronic infiltration, and the art of deterrence through preparation rather than aggression. In return, humanity learned from their allies' strengths. Craxian armor technology, Zalathi strategic planning, Voidling intelligence networks. But always, in the background, were reminders of what had changed. When pirates attempted to raid a human colony in the outer systems, they found their ships disabled before they could even arm weapons. The colonists themselves never saw the boogeymen who had protected them, only finding the pirate vessels drifting powerless with crews unconscious and a simple message in their computers. Protected by Earth. Earth, when a rogue hegemony faction tried to claim a disputed system by force, they found their invasion fleet trapped in a gravity well that hadn't existed moments before. Human ships appeared just long enough to offer evacuation to any who wanted to surrender, then vanished again, leaving the aggressors to contemplate their choices while their life support slowly dwindled. The galaxy learned that humanity's protection came in two forms: the visible shield of conventional forces and allied fleets, and the invisible sword of the special operations teams that might or might not be watching from the shadows at any given moment. It's psychological warfare on a galactic scale, analyzed Commander Kresh of the Craxian Military Academy. They've made themselves into the monsters under the bed. You never know if they're there, so you have to assume they always are. It's brilliant and terrifying. But the true masterstroke came a year after the treaty. Ambassador Chen stood before the Galactic Council once more. This time with a proposal that stunned even those who thought they now understood humanity. We want to share the boogeymen, she announced. The chamber erupted in confusion. Share their most powerful military asset? Not the soldiers themselves, Chen clarified. But the training. The philosophy. We propose creating a joint special operations program. Each member species can contribute their best warriors to learn our methods, adapted to their unique physiologies and psychologies. In return, they share their own specialized skills. Why? Thax asked, genuinely puzzled. Why give up your greatest advantage? Because, Chen smiled, a galaxy where everyone has boogeymen is a galaxy where no one needs to use them. Mutual assured protection instead of mutual assured destruction. If everyone can strike from the shadows, then the shadows protect everyone. It was ambitious beyond belief. Teaching alien species the arts that humanity had perfected over centuries of conflict. But it was also brilliant. By sharing their strength, humanity ensured that no single species could dominate through these tactics. It created a balance of power based on capability rather than aggression. The first joint training class convened on Titan, in facilities that had been hidden beneath the ice for decades. 12 species sent their best warriors to learn from humanity's shadows. The graduation ceremony, 18 months later, was held in secret, but its effects were felt across the galaxy. Pirates found their raids failing before they began. Slavers discovered their victims vanishing from supposedly secure facilities. Warmongers learned that their plans were known and countered before they could act. The galaxy's shadows had become populated with protectors, each trained in the human arts but adapted to their own species' strengths. We've created a new form of peace, General Mitchell observed, watching the latest class of multi-species operators train together. Not peace through weakness or peace through domination, but peace through the promise of precise, overwhelming response to aggression. 5 years after humanity revealed their true nature, Ambassador Chen retired from diplomatic service. Her replacement was Ambassador Marcus Stone, the former Colonel Reaper, who had led the first Boogeyman operations. It was a symbolic choice, showing that humanity's warriors and diplomats were two sides of the same coin. In his first address to the Galactic Council, Stone removed his formal robes to reveal the scars that covered his arms and neck. Battle scars, training scars, the price of becoming one of humanity's monsters. These marks, he said, are why we chose diplomacy. Every human soldier bears scars, physical or mental, from our history of conflict. We became good at war because we had to. We became great at war because we couldn't stop. And we nearly destroyed ourselves because we were the best at war. He looked around the chamber at the assembled species, many now bearing their own scars from the joint training programs. So we chose a different path. We hid our strength not from shame but from wisdom. We accepted mockery not from weakness but from hope. Hope that we could be better than our nature. That the galaxy could be better than endless cycles of conquest and subjugation. And now? Asked the new Craxian representative, one of Thax's daughters who had graduated from the joint program. Now we stand together, Stone replied. Not as conquerors and conquered, but as allies. Not as predators and prey, but as protectors. We've shown you our darkness so that together we can guard the light. The Boogeymen are no longer just humanity's monsters. They belong to all of us, and that means no one, anywhere, needs to fear the dark anymore. The chamber erupted in applause, a sound that would have been impossible to imagine 5 years earlier. The cowards had become teachers. The weaklings had become protectors. The joke of the galaxy had become its guardian. On Earth, children still learned about the time humanity hid its strength, but now they learned it as a story of wisdom rather than weakness. They learned that true strength wasn't in the ability to destroy but in the choice not to. That real courage wasn't in fighting every battle, but in knowing which battles not to fight. And in the shadows, on 1,000 worlds, the new generation of Boogeymen stood watch, human and alien, working together. They embodied humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. The knowledge that the most powerful weapon wasn't fear, but the controlled application of fear in service of peace. The Galactic Empire that had once labeled humanity cowards had become the Galactic Alliance that knew humanity as teachers. The transformation was complete, not through conquest but through choice. Not through domination but through demonstration, not through war but through the promise of what would happen if war came. In her retirement, Chen often walked the shores of Lake Geneva, where the first treaties had been signed that tried to limit human warfare centuries ago. Those treaties had failed because they tried to contain human nature rather than channel it. But the new Galactic Treaty had succeeded because it recognized a fundamental truth. You couldn't remove the monster from humanity. You could only choose what kind of monster to be. Humanity had chosen to be the monster that protected rather than preyed. The monster that taught rather than terrorized. The monster that showed mercy not from weakness but from the absolute certainty of what would happen if mercy failed. And so the galaxy found peace, not in the absence of weapons, but in their promise. Not in the hiding of strength, but in its revelation. Not in the elimination of fear, but in its transformation into respect. The cowards had become kings not of an empire built on conquest, but of an alliance built on the most human of principles. That those who have the most power to destroy have the greatest responsibility to protect. In the end, the galaxy learned what humanity had always known. The most dangerous predator wasn't the one with the biggest teeth or the sharpest claws. It was the one smart enough to hide them until they were needed, and wise enough to hope they never would be. The Boogeymen remained in the shadows, no longer just American, no longer just human, but galactic. They were the promise and the threat, the shield and the sword, the monster that chose to serve rather than rule. And the galaxy slept peacefully, knowing that its monsters were bigger than any external threat, because humanity had shared its greatest secret: how to turn fear into freedom, warriors into protectors, and cowards into the bravest souls in the universe. The transformation was complete. The joke had become the guardian. And in the shadows, the Boogeymen smiled, knowing their job was done. Not through violence but through its promise. Not through war but through its prevention. Humanity had given the galaxy its monsters, and in doing so, they had given it peace.